We are back here with Denvil. Thank you, Denvil, for joining us. And I said that we would answer any questions, and so we've got a very good question here today. Well, there's actually two questions in this one question. So, Denvil, you can answer this or these any way you want. And I trust Denvil's heart. We've had a lot of conversations, and he has shown me that he's got my same heart of love and acceptance. So that's why I give him the freedom. And you know, when I first started making these videos, some people said, "Would you answer questions?" And I didn't know, especially this one question that's going to come today. I didn't know how to do it in a way that would explain my heart. But as I've talked to Denvil, my heart was explained. and so I just am very excited for this or these questions. This is, if Denville's going to go longer, I'll cut him off so that then we can make another one, a continued part 2.
I'll keep it short.
Okay? There, Alyssa Azule wrote, "What does he think of Jews and homosexuality?"
He as in...
I think she's talking about you.
Me? Okay.
Or God. I don't know which one.
That's interesting. Well, I don't know if anyone cares what I think, but but I think that if you're talking about God, if you're asking what God thinks, I think that's a really challenging and interesting question, because knowing God's thoughts is something that I think anyone should really be careful in proclaiming in great certainty. But even my own thoughts and what I think on the topic, this is, and I speak very cautiously here, because I was sharing with Mary that I have the opportunity and the privilege of serving and pastoring a church where, there are different people groups represented here and
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Please. Are you answering both questions or one question? Or?
I'm going to see where this goes.
Okay.
No, and I think it's just always, it's difficult when we have private conversations publicly, and there's some conversations that really should be private, and I think in recent times we've seen a lot of public conversations of private matters. And questions that really can't be answered generally, they're being given a lot of generalizations, and I think it's causing a lot of confusion, and it's causing a lot of hurt and damage and brokenness amongst people groups and amongst families and etc. But one, I think that of Jewish people or of gay people, I mean, it's such a weird concept. To divide people in such a way.
That's true.
I was sharing with Mary a text message from a friend of mine who was kind of explaining that as a gay person, that like what has really liberated him is feeling like he's human again.
Yes.
And it just sits so well with me in that, like, I think that when we go off into different types of titles and etc., it really starts to pull away from like our humanity, which really has to be the foundation and the basis of which we understand people, right? So of God and of Jewish people, that's rather simple. As a Christian, I believe that Jesus is not just a representation of God or just an image of God, but I believe that Jesus actually is God. I believe that God, it represents himself and came to earth in the person of Jesus Christ, and Jesus Christ happened to have been a Jew. And so that's a really simple question about how God feels about Jewish people. He loved them so much that he became one of them.
I like that.
And he came to reveal more of who God is, and he came to reveal God as a loving father, and to present the love of God in perhaps a way that could not be communicated outside of a human experience. And so I like to explain it, like God comes and he kind of stuffs himself in this person of Jesus so that we can grasp and understand God. And so all of our ideas of God and everything that we think about God it finds its best context and the greatest ideas in the person of Jesus. Because I think outside of Jesus, we just have lofty ideas, and it's all very murky and blurry about who God is. So
That's true.
So God came as a Jewish man. He loves Jewish people. He came for the Jewish people first. And salvation came to us. I'm able to be a Christian and have a relationship with God because of the Jewish people, and because God became a Jewish man.
Okay, I know the answer to my question,
Yes.
but I thought of a question that might fit in here.
Yeah.
And that is does that mean that he loves the other people less than Jews?
No. So I mean, God chose to bring himself, Jesus, through the lineage of the Jewish people. That was his plan. I mean, we see that in the story of Abraham. God chooses Abraham, and he says, through Abraham, I'm going to bless the entire world. God choosing to move through the Jewish people is not just a decision for the Jewish people. God choosing to move through the Jewish people speaks vastly of humanity, because he says, I'm going to bless the entire world through this. And so I don't think being Jew is anything, being a Jew is nothing to really boast about or be super excited about as God's chosen people, because God chose the Jewish people because he wanted to bless the entire world.
So everybody's equal.
And he chose them as a conduit through which he would bring a knowledge of himself to the entire world. And so I guess I could just kind of segue into this one here. But even in that, you constantly see God's heart, God's vision, his passion is always after all people.
Yeah.
Like, even in choosing the Jewish people, his heart was that the whole world, that everyone would be blessed. He says the whole world is going to be blessed through you. So God is always concerned about all of humanity. Like, even in choosing how he's going to do this thing and how he's going to make himself known, he's calculating you. He's calculating me. He's calculating everyone in that equation, and not just a few selected people.
Okay.
So we have to see that. We have to. One of the things I really enjoy doing is questioning the motives of God.
Oh.
Like, always like, God, why do you do this? And I think that if we answer the question right all the time, both historically, biblically, spiritually, however you answer these questions, the right answer to questioning God's motive always comes back down to the central theme of the fact that God simply loves humanity. Like, any question at all, we should do that one day. Any question, I've done it so much just by myself, but any question, like my kids, they'll ask why, like I'll tell them something like, why, and then you start running out of answers as to why. Like, you kind of dwindle down to, like, you come to the bottom of it, and eventually it's just because God loves you, and that's what he chose to do.
Yeah.
But God's plan is always for humanity, and I in my message on Sunday, I shared, that it's interesting that God didn't come as a donkey, that he didn't come as a horse, that he didn't come as a dog. He came as a human. Like, he chose humanity to come through, because humanity is the prize of his creation. Like, God created everything, and out of everything that he created, he chose us. He chose humanity to be at the high point of that we would control all of creation, that we would have the final say. Like, nothing is great, nothing has impacted the world more, whether it's good or bad, but nothing has impacted the world more than the human race. Because God simply loves humanity, and God has given humanity the supreme role on the earth. And so much so, and we see this in that when God chooses to reveal himself into humanity, he comes as a human. He becomes a person. He doesn't become a tree. He doesn't become the sun. He becomes a human being. And I think that if I could, like I said, segue into that, when answering any kind of questions about, how God feels about gay people or bisexual people or transvestites or lesbians, however we kind of take this, I think that if we're striving really hard to give an identity to a human being that's greater than their humanity, I think it takes away from the emphasis that God primarily puts. Like, God has an emphasis on humanity. God has an emphasis on human beings. I'm going to bless human beings through human beings, and I'm going to become a human being for all of human beings. For God so loved the world, he's not just talking about the physical earth, he's talking about the people, you know? And so I think the greatest form of identifying someone has to just simply understand first that they're human.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes, and I have some friends who are not heterosexual, who I've kind of even tried to get to just see this, like the greatest identity for me is not heterosexual. Mm-hmm. Like I would never meet someone and I'm like, hey, there's Denvil, the heterosexual guy. You know what I mean? Like no one has ever identified me as that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And like no one has ever identified heterosexual people by that. And I think that we put this like unnecessary pressure on people by causing their main form of identity to be their sexuality, and we seem to only do that with a certain group of people.
That's true.
We seem to do that with only, and so I think that I think we just have to be careful. You know, I think we have to be careful. While it's a good question, I think that because the question is asked about like put in that identity in a certain way, I just kind of I'm careful in how far I go with that because there are other problems within the question itself, you know.
Can I say one thing?
Please.
That for me, I'm a very simple person. It's like it all boils down to one thing.
Yeah.
It boils down to the heart for me.
Yeah.
Right?
That's you know, one of the things that people always ask, you know, is and sometimes I share certain ideas and I get a lot of feedback, some good, some bad, but people always ask, you know, well, what does God do with homosexuals, you know? And I'm like, what, like the same thing he does with heterosexuals? Like, I don't know. Like, it's so, like, again, it's just the lens through which we view the world, right? And so sometimes those questions can really be challenging because it's like, I know what you're wanting to say, and so in the most recent conversation I've had, someone asked, you know, does God look past homosexuality? And I was like, well, God looks past everything.
Yes.
You know what I mean? I was like, and so like, well, it sounds, Denvil, it sounds like you're saying that God is looking past homosexuality. And I'm like, no, you need to hear me clearer. I'm saying something way more offensive. I'm saying that God looks past everything. As a matter of fact, he looks past your riches. He looks past your good works. He looks past everything. He's not impressed by the little things you do. He looks past your church attendance. You know what I mean? Like, and so I think we think that God is so impressed with us and in what we're doing to please him, and it's like he looks past all those things. He looks past my good things, or even the things I think are good. He looks past them. He looks past my bad things. He looks past my neutral things. He looks past everything because he's looking for me. You know what I mean?
Another one thing. The most freeing moment of my life was when I realized, it's about 7 years ago, I realized that my heart was black. My heart, and
I've been watching the news, so I know.
Yeah. Okay, you know what I mean, you know.
Yeah.
Okay. My heart was filthy. There was nothing good in my heart. That was the most freeing thing that ever happened to me.
Yeah.
And then it's like at that very moment, I knew that God loved me completely.
Yeah.
And it's from that time on, I felt accepted by God.
Yeah.
Even though I've been a Christian for 36 years,
Yeah.
it's only 6 years that I felt accepted.
Yeah.
Oh, we've got 1 minute. Can we go?
Yeah.
Do you have more to say for another segment? Or?
No, I could wrap it up in a minute. I think, you know. So as to what God thinks about these types of people, you know, I think it's really important to understand, you know, and again, if you're watching, and I would love to answer more specific questions because such a general question can go in any direction. So I mean, if you have questions that are more specific, I'll be more than happy to kind of tackle them, you know. But concepts of God is not God. Ideas of God, if someone just simply understands that God is this way or God is this way, like, and these are God's rules, that's not God. Like concepts of who I am is not me. You know, the ideas of who I am is not me.
I see what you're saying.
And so Jesus comes to make God known. He doesn't come to make concepts of God known. He comes to make God known. And so what are my thoughts on gay people? What are my thoughts on Jewish people? What are my thoughts on all people? Is that they would know God. Not ideas of God, not concepts of God, not rules of God, but that they would come to know God.
Yes.
And that is, as a Christian, as a pastor, as a man, that is what I think about them.
That's wonderful.
So.
And if there are, Jose's going like this. If there are any further questions about this thing, we'll tackle them, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let us know. Bye.